Bucky insisted that we needed to begin with the big picture and work back to the specifics to achieve understanding. He insisted one cannot begin with specifics because the universe is synergenic, meaning there is system behavior that is unpredictable from studying individual parts of the system. So, let's begin with the big picture. Bucky observed that the world was not working for everyone. Some people had their basic needs taken care of, but a majority of the world was still struggling to meet basic needs. Some nations were wealthy, but many were not. Some were wealthy at the expense of others. Many directly or indirectly imported natural resources and exported pollution. Bucky had empirical evidence that the world had sufficient resources to take care of 100% of humanity. We just needed a better operating system. He believed our operating system, our economics and politics, are based on the flawed assumption that resources are inherently scarce. He was not one to believe something without empirical evidence, and his evidence suggested otherwise. Given this flawed assumption, he saw that the world would continue to fight over resources as it had always done in the past. Importantly, with the introduction of nuclear weapons, humanity had reached a point where a global conflict over resources is potentially terminal. Bucky observed that everyone gets along, even if we wildly disagree, when resources are available and abundant. This is not to say everyone must agree on everything. We are inherently free to pursue our own interests. In fact, it is imperative that we do. Bucky uses the tangible example of people from all walks of life sitting together in a theater until a fire breaks out and oxygen becomes scarce. People will do crazy things to each other in that kind of environment. Grown men may run over children. Even the most altruistic of us, who refuse to take something at the expense of others, will ultimately have a choice to make as soon as they need to protect and feed their kids. Bucky believed that not only do we need enough resources, but people also need to be aware that we collectively have enough resources. In other words, we need an open ledger. The world is trapped to this day believing that our resources are scarce and dwindling by the day. It is no wonder the global conflict over them continues to this day. Our economics and politics are both based on the faulty assumption that resources are inherently scarce and therefore need to be allocated. Bucky understood our resources are only limited by our intellect or know-how and our ability to harness energy. Our know-how, especially in the age of AI, is constantly increasing. Every time we run an experiment, we always learn more, he would say, even if the experiment fails. And since energy cannot be created nor destroyed, it can only go from one system to another, there is ultimately no shortage of resources. The challenge then is to spread the knowledge and harness the abundant, distributed, and renewable resources of inexhaustible energy. Bucky noticed that infrastructure at this scale was nearly impossible to build out because it always, to quote, cost too much. However, this was based on the existing accounting system that didn't account for the cost of not taking action. According to Bucky, it requires a true accounting system based on time and energy. The one exception to this was during war. Bucky observed that historically, the threat of war was the only catalyst for innovation and infrastructure at this scale. Refrigeration, telegraphy, radar, GPS, penicillin are some of the many examples of technology that trickled down from the military. Today, we have things like the internet, semiconductors, and SHA-256. Bucky would say we do the right things for the wrong reasons, and we needed a new incentive structure to kickstart the development of global energy infrastructure. With the right incentive structure, we could do the right thing for the right reason. Once he understood this challenge, he was faced with how to communicate such a global undertaking with the world without upsetting power structures that had everything to lose. War was extremely profitable to many with power. He could not speak directly to the issue without getting suppressed. He found that by talking in the future tense and designing way into the future, He was allowed to speak freely as it did not threaten the existing power structure. He was then faced with the challenge of communicating the necessary information for humanity to stop fighting and instead cooperate or compete. He learned that it was very hard to change people's minds, as people don't listen to things they aren't interested in. Instead, he realized, he was able to alter the environment in a way that benefits individuals and thereby indirectly change people's behavior on their own terms. He called this process comprehensive anticipatory design science. He recognized that he was able to place what he called artifacts, physical or metaphysical, into the world and walk away. As long as it was mutually beneficial to everyone, people would adapt and change their behavior out of their own interest. His design parameter was essentially, does this help humanity? If so, I will do the work and place artifacts into the world and walk away. He was confident that the principles of the universe would take care of the rest. Universal principles like leverage never go on vacation, he would say. They are eternal and work 100% of the time, at any scale. They are time and scale invariant. He was absolutely confident that if you give people the right environment, they will behave favorably. So, how does one communicate an invisible idea like the Bitcoin network? By making the invisible visible and tangible and tying it to something everyone was familiar with. He called this applied philosophy. So, how did Bucky do it? Well, he used something everyone could relate to. He used a house. Houses are physical property that people can understand. They are the physical equivalent of digital property, also known as Bitcoin. In 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto followed this playbook by placing an artifact called the Bitcoin protocol into the world and walked away, knowing the rest would take care of itself.